Every marathon that I've run has been a personal best, but that didn't just happen. It took 4 training blocks, a heap of mistakes, and one key change that made all the difference: increasing my weekly mileage. Before 2023, I never trained for any particular running event, and the thought of running a marathon never really crossed my mind. Looking back at it now, I think the only official running event that I actually competed in was the 2015 Mother's Day Classic 5 km event in Melbourne. Maybe a few park runs here and there with a friend, but nothing ever really consistent. On top of my already busy day job, I suddenly had to factor in all this time to fit marathon training into my week as well. Suddenly, my entire routine changed, and it felt very odd in the first few weeks having to run so often. 2023 was the first year that I ran consistently, starting off averaging around 20 kilometers per week in mileage for the first training block, working my way up to 63.6 kilometers in peak week in late October before heading over to complete the New York City Marathon in early November. After a not so pleasant experience running my first marathon, I decided to shift my focus to training for my second one, gradually bumping up the peak week mileage to 73.2 kilometers. In my second marathon training block, I averaged between 55 and 65 kilometers over the course of the 16-week training build. The biggest concern that I faced when training for my second marathon wasn't actually trying to hit the mileage, it was dealing with what felt like chronic shin splints. I got to the point where I was rather diligent with training in the gym twice a week to combat the amount of stress I was putting on my shins, but nothing seemed to work, and going to the physio week by week, I was just being told to do the same exercises in the gym, but nothing was working. It's also the reason why when I started training for my third marathon, I didn't really want to change too much to the mileage that I was running. Really concerned about my shins here. For my third marathon, bumping up my peak week mileage to 80 kilometers, so a rather conservative approach, only adding an additional 8 kilometers. Here I managed to achieve a 13-minute personal best, hitting 3 hours, 30 minutes and 51 seconds as my official time in Chicago. Although almost a year since New York and this being one of the most solid marathons I'd experienced, still was disappointed that I didn't quite achieve the sub 3 hour 30 goal that I was aiming for. During the course of training for the Chicago Marathon, it was also where I found out I'd secured a charity entry into the 2025 Tokyo Marathon. So after completing Chicago, realized that I only had quite a short recovery window before having to get into my next marathon training block. It was around the middle of November when I hopped on my computer to start creating my 2025 Tokyo Marathon training plan, and it was here where I decided I wanted to create a training plan that actually scared me a little bit. It was also here where I decided my week 1 of training would actually outdo my peak week mileage for Chicago, deciding I would then and there run 7 days a week and also complete 2 gym sessions on top. The thought process at that time was, okay, I've ran 3 marathons and really haven't managed to injure myself. What have I got to lose here? I've obviously developed the running base, but also the training resilience to push my body a little more. For this 13-week marathon training plan, envisioned myself running 115 kilometers in peak week. This though didn't quite come into fruition after going through week 1, realizing my body just wasn't ready to run 7 days a week. So after week 1, I decided to rein it back in, sticking to 6 days worth of running and my 2 strength sessions in the gym. Firstly, this would allow my body to recover on the Sundays in preparation for the next week worth of training, and I managed to top out at a peak week mileage of 105.4 kilometers. So now in this section, I thought I'd share what my peak week kind of mileage looked like in each of my marathon builds. So starting off when training for New York City back in 2023, obviously used Training Peaks as my training platform where I was coached on. So getting into almost peak week period, we did our 30K selection event in Alice Springs to earn our spots to run New York City. So before heading into there, did 55.1, 61.1, and then tapering down before running our 30K selection event just over a month out until New York. When we got back to our own home communities, obviously had recovery run afterwards just to get back into things. And then 63.6 was where I peaked as well, and actually only managed 28 kilometers as like a long run before tapering down even further, going from 59.2 to 35.1 before running the New York City Marathon in 4 hours, 29 and 36 by my Strava time on my watch there. So now coming over to my Strava, because Garmin Connect just didn't look right. So for my second marathon, Ballarat Marathon, getting into 73.1 Ks, dropping down a bit to 64.8, peaking at 74.4, and I'm pretty sure I've actually got my maths wrong with how many Ks and peak week mileage I did earlier on in the video, but here we are. And then getting into, that was my final week of training, and then to the Ballarat Marathon as well. So yeah, bit of an increase in comparison to my New York City training. Now looking over to Chicago Marathon, so getting up to peak week mileage, so 76.7 kilometers for the week before peak week, topping out at 80.4 kilometers, and then we see a nice little gradual taper 3-week period before getting into the marathon there, where I ran the 3:30:51 PB. And finally, getting into my Tokyo Marathon training, which I completed most recently. So again, getting into peak week mileage, where I did have quite a progression, I guess we'll call it, before doing some deload weeks as well, which I found really helped with my longevity. So getting into peak week period, 84.9 kilometers, and then topping out at 105.4 kilometers, which was really good to see, tapering down nicely before running 3 hours, 12 minutes, and 10 seconds. But as we can see here on the right, my official Strava time was 3:08:55, but yeah, gonna use my official one there for Tokyo Marathon. Lastly, if you are curious on seeing what exactly each of those 3 marathon training plans look like to the T, I've actually created this very basic Notion site too, where it's got all access to each of my 3 marathon training plans that I've completed. Tried my best to put my New York one in, but it just got a little too confusing with how different of a training that one was too. So if you're keen on really having an insight into how exactly I ran each of those times, then yeah, more than happy for you to check it out. And I'll leave a link to the Notion page in the description below. So now, after going through those marathon times and the rough weekly mileage I was achieving for each of those, thought I'd share some of my takeaways after completing them now. Firstly, I'm a firm believer that completing a majority of your weekly mileage at an easy pace will help develop a strong running base over the long term, as long as you're staying consistent with your running. For some context, I've actually just finished my first week of training for my 5th marathon now, hitting 83 kilometers and knowing I still had plenty left in the tank. Obviously though, this didn't come overnight, and it was actually the result of training consistently over these almost 2 years now that have allowed me to do so. While my quality sessions like intervals and tempo runs have obviously helped me get faster in the marathon distance, I do have to thank all of my easy running for building that strong base in the first place that allowed me to train with a bit more intensity. So if you are looking at one key way to get faster over the marathon distance, I feel like it's increasing the easy mileage you cover each week in your training. It's not getting the fastest carbon-plated running shoes, technology, or all of the recovery gadgets we see. It's one simple training change you can make to actually see results. And I hope me going from 4 hours 29 minutes in my first marathon to 3 hours and 12 minutes in my 4th one can be a bit of a testament to show that. So there we have it, friends. The one key change that I believed helped me get from 4 hours 29 through to 3 hours 12 minutes in my most recent marathon. I hope you found this insight into my marathon journey and the one change that I really felt like shifted the needle insightful. Again, when it comes to training for something like the marathon, there are obviously so many things that we can change from time to time. However, I'd recommend only focusing on changing one thing at a time as you go through your training. And for me, training for Marathon 5, my one key change that I'm focusing on is improving my nutrition strategy, because I still can't hold gels down even in my marathon races. Speaking of nutrition, if you're someone training for your first marathon or are looking at ways that you can fuel yourself properly for the marathon distance, I've got this video here that you may enjoy watching. I'm Jack, and I'll see you next time. Catch up.